Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Vandy Sports Podcast. Here's your host, Chris Lee. Commodore fans, on your feet. It's time to anchor down.
Welcome to the Vandy Sports Podcast presented by Dr. Jody Jones, DDS. We're part of the 440 Sports Network. I'm your host, Chris Lee. Our guest today, Chip Fridrich, will talk Vanderbilt baseball. Chip appears on the guest line. That's presented by Michael Kendrick of the Kendrick Group. Michael is a local carpenter and a lifelong Vandy fan. He builds bookshelves, cabinets, picture frames, furniture, and made-to-order items, including a display case for my prized Dale Murphy jersey. I've seen Michael's work. He's a true craftsman. If you are in the market for custom woodwork, and my goodness, you should be, because he does a great job, give Michael a call. That number, 615-830-9458. Our question and answer session with Chip is presented by Sutherland & Belk, a family-owned injury law firm. If you or a loved one has been in an accident, give Taylor or Russell a call. That number, 615-846-6200. See what your rights are and if they can help. Now on to our podcast with Chip Fridrich. Chip Fridrich joins us today. Vanderbilt is riding an 8-game winning streak. It run-ruled Lipscomb yesterday in a rescheduled game from last week. Chip, hard to believe what the offense is doing right now after what it was doing about 3 weeks ago. In any case, Commodores on a roll. You're here to talk about it. We appreciate you joining us and hope you are doing well.
Thanks, Chris. Doing well. And yeah, when you look back on that weekend of the Loyola Marymount series, when this team, the first two games, could only muster two runs, albeit they were wins. And then they go on a tear against Belmont on March 14th and score 15 runs and carry that over to the weekend against Ole Miss. And then, my goodness, I don't think I've ever witnessed anything like, not in person, but just in following and watching and listening and the games in Starkville. When you score 26 runs, it gets a lot of people's attention in this league. Now, it caused, especially on that Friday night, and they just continue it with 18 runs on Saturday and 11 on Sunday. And it does cause a little bit of a pause that you see what's going on with the teams that we've been doing it against. You look at the standings, Mississippi State and Ole Miss are winless on their side, both 0-6, and having their struggles on the pitching staff, especially Ole Miss with some injuries. And then Mississippi State's got all sorts of troubles. And that's a whole nother subject we could get into. But you want to be positive and excited, and it continues against Lipscomb with double-digit runs last night. And you've got an opportunity this weekend against Georgia, a team that's struggling in their own right at 1-5. So this could continue if they stay on this hot streak. And it does have a little bit of pause, though, that you say to yourself that it's quite obvious that Vanderbilt has played, some weaker competition and had the advantage of doing that in the SEC schedule. It favors them on the front side. And so again, you don't want to get too far ahead of yourself, but boy, in this league, as good as it is, when you can score double-digit runs in the number of games they've done in the last 6 or 7, that it's impressive and something to build on.
Well, I think you might be able to suit up and pitch for Mississippi State right now and get out, given how bad that staff has been. Yeah, and I mean, to be fair, and Ole Miss without Hunter Elliott is not the same team. But we look back to the first weekend of March, 5 runs against Nebraska, 8 runs against Maryland, and really the thing that really stood out, they get 4 runs against an awful Minnesota team in a park where the ball was just really getting out of there. Fast forward, they get 12 against Tennessee Tech, but then 2-1 win over Evansville, 2-1 win over Loyola, 2-0 win over Loyola, and then that 9-6 loss, during which Vanderbilt gets 4 in the bottom of the ninth, and kind of make a run at it time. Since that time, it has been a completely different offense, and I've been hit and miss about what I've been able to watch. I've seen probably more than half of the action since, but one common theme when you see people talking on our message board, it seems like they have been more aggressive in fastball counts, and they are just ripping the daylights out of those right now.
I'd agree with that, and I think in watching Rhett Wiseman, he did the color, I enjoyed having Rhett on there. on the broadcast SEC Plus last night. Recent player who's knows his coaching staff and knows the style of how they teach things, and it was nice to have him on there. And he basically said the same thing: being more aggressive, attacking fastballs early in the count, not overthinking things. Those were all things that he said and things that we've been echoing as well. And it's good to hear that they're one and the same. So, of course, when things are going well, and I've been on teams before when it's happened, when you score 26 runs against somebody in their park, the ball looks like a beach ball. I mean, it's coming in there. You're hitting everything. Every time you guess right. Food tastes better. The bed, you sleep better in the hotel. It's just everything rolls when you do that. And the psychological mess that Mississippi State was in that last weekend, I've been on the other end of that a little bit when I played, and it is no fun when a team just runs roughshod over you in your own park. And they've got some, that is not going to hold up well for Lamonas down there if they don't start winning some games, because that stadium and their fan base and, the national championship from 2 years ago, Chris, that is something that, they've got banners up, I'm sure, and the trophies in a case, but that dog's not going to hunt very long. I'm telling you. I don't know if you have any information from any of your counterparts on that do boards there, or all the contacts that you have, but that, all of a sudden the shine is off that trophy, and they better start winning some games, because you get 9, 10, 11,000 people in the stands on Friday and Saturday, and I think 3 show up maybe on Sunday, and there's already some discontent. But we can talk about that later in a separate conversation. But no, it's attacking fastballs, being aggressive, not overthinking things. And the pitching staff, they didn't. You're right. I maybe could have thrown a few that inning I don't remember any, except maybe on Sunday, any time that the game was ever really in doubt. Things got a little bit hairy when they scored some runs on Sunday and cut it within 4. But my goodness, 4. There was never any panic here, and that's the kind of when you're a pitcher and you can have leads like that, you're pretty comfortable out there on the bump.
Well, I do want to detour to Mississippi State for a moment, because the contrast between now and a couple of years ago is astonishing. That's a very proud baseball program that was maybe the best baseball program that had never won a national title until it won it 2 years ago. Didn't make Hoover last year. And I always think, and look, a lot of it is just they don't have pitching for whatever reason, which is kind of hard to fathom. But they don't. But to me, when you lose games 26-3 and then 18-5, and State, won 14 games this year. I mean, to me, that is, I don't know. To me, that seems like that's more than just we got our tails beat.
And he took some, I will say this about Lamonas. He took ownership on Sunday after the weekend happened and said, I've got to do better. I've got to coach better. I don't have this team prepared. But yeah, and then it starts to, whenever this happens, a situation like this happens to a team, the fans start unraveling and appealing it all back. Well, he didn't recruit any of those kids that we won the 2019 title with. And what has he done? And why are all these people entering the portal? And why does he, what's wrong with his recruiting classes, and why can't they get the pitching? And of course, the cries of the 11.7. I told a buddy of mine, I said, after the Saturday victory, I said, well, I'm sure there's going to be the cries of the 11.7 scholarships come up, and certainly it did. I saw some talk about that already, but that's just fan bases for you, especially theirs. So, Chris, that is not, I would say that the seed is very hot already, because that model is not sustainable for the money they poured into that stadium and what they got in the fan base and their expectations. When you lose that many in a row, and then you start thinking about, well, it's not only they're 0-6, but then you start going back to last year where they seemingly just tanked. I'm not saying they intentionally tanked, but they just fell apart at the end of the season, and it all runs together. So it will be interesting to watch and see how that develops. But things aren't really rosy for the state of Mississippi as far as baseball right now, when your two teams are combined 0-12 and hadn't won a game. And then when you're Mississippi State, you hadn't won, what have they lost, 17 in a row conference games? That's tough to swallow.
Look, I don't want to get into making fun of Mississippi State. I have a lot of respect for that program. But the 11.7 at this point just seems absurd. I mean, you've got some schools out there that win NIL seem to have 111.7, and Vanderbilt's not one of those at this point.
Yeah, and they, for some reason, that fan base has gotten, you hear it from others, but they had a person in the stands who had a sign I saw that said 11.7 strong. They held up, over the weekend, big yellow sign. And they've just got it in their crawl that's what they're going to, hang it on when they're playing Vanderbilt. But their problems are far, when you have that much tradition and you got a facility like that, you got to be able to put some guys through the portal and get them to be attracted there. And they have. I mean, I can't remember how many times on the broadcast this weekend, this pitcher is a transfer from VCU and this player is a transfer from Tulane. And so they've tried to do that, but they're just so young on the hill, and they hit some, towards on Sunday, they had some productive innings offensively, but man, when you're down 21-3 or 20, whatever it is, it's just hard to get yourself off the carpet. And that's what happened all weekend. I'm just telling you, the way this league works on the psychological side of it, that it is hard to, you get drubbed that bag on Friday night, and then it's hard to get up off the carpet the next two. And they certainly didn't respond on Saturday. And a lot of that has to be, I'm sure, it was refreshing to see Lamonis take the heat for it, but at some time, of course, it's the players' responsibility, and a couple players responded that they need to take some onus on it too.
Well, the hitting numbers were incredible, but let's also look at the pitching lately. Vanderbilt, starting with the Ole Miss series last week, has allowed 2, 0, 2, 3, 5, 7, and 1. And that's with a couple of guys missing, or at least one guy missing, and Andrew Dukanich, who was going to be their number 4 starter, it appeared. I mean, I think the offensive numbers are tremendous, and that's the talk of Vanderbilt baseball right now, and rightfully should be, but they are just locking it down defensively and pitching-wise right now. And let's face it, for Allstate's problems, that team can really still hit the ball. And there's a lot of guys that have played a lot of baseball in Starkville, a lot of good hitters, and I thought that was, I'm not going to say it was overlooked, but that was an impressive thing that I think they did defensively and on the mound really the last 2 weekends also.
Yeah, and it's certainly easy to pitch, as I just said, with the lead like you had, but I thought those 3 guys that they rolled out, Holton, Owen, Futrell, were very businesslike. They didn't get themselves in any trouble. You got some activity a little bit from the pen this weekend. And what happens, and Rhett Wiseman said this in the broadcast last night, is you end up, when you have leads like that and you're blowing people out, the negative, and you just nitpicking here, is you don't get some guys some action that they need to have to get out there and get the experience. They did, put some guys out there and spread it out towards the end, through the later innings, but you don't get that, I mean, Maldonado pitched how many innings that last weekend? Was it 1 or 2?
I think 1.
1, yeah. And so, that's a great benefit, but I think that's kind of what they tried to do last night in the victory, is try to spread it out a little more, but it's a good problem to have. I'm not complaining. But man, defensively, they're rolling double plays at an unbelievable pace. I think it leads the conference in turning double plays. This team, and they're exuding a lot of confidence. Not saying there won't be some bumps down the road, but they're playing well defensively. A lot of big smiles on their faces. A lot of you can just tell and sense that they're really not playing stressed. They're love being out there, and baseball's unlike, you can see it. Unlike football, the guy's got a helmet on. Basketball uses more facial expressions, you can tell, but baseball, that it seems to be, it's just outwardly apparent that those guys, and you can tell with comfort level that these guys are enjoying playing with one another. They're playing for each other, and they're a fun team to watch right now. And you got to just hope that it continues.
Yeah, you bring up a good point there that I meant to bring up the other day. I think this team is having more fun. You're seeing more guys smiling on the field. I mean, that team seemed like it was wound pretty tight about 3 weeks ago. And it seems like they sort of dialed it down last year with the plate stomping and stuff like that, which used to just get people irritated to no end, and the calisthenics in left field. And it's felt for a couple of years this program's been wound pretty tightly. It feels like some of the old swagger and personality is maybe back with this bunch.
Yeah, I mean, you see R.J. Austin certainly has a personality it's flamboyant, and that's great. I mean, he gets excited, and Davis Diaz as well. I mean, those two guys, are energetic and good to see. I think they probably were. I think you hit it right there. They were a little more tightly wound last year, and maybe towards the beginning of the year. But you can just tell personalities of teams. Vastine, I think, is since they've made those switches in the infield and played musical chairs on the deck and moved him to short and kind of rotated the infield around. I think that that has helped too. So I just like the way this team is playing right now. Still somewhat reserved, and I'm not saying the jury's out. I think this team is at 19-5 and 6-0 in the conference is do what they are getting as far as the polls. I kind of said last week, I'm not trying to eat my words here, but I didn't know if they were the fourth team in the country. Well, certainly after this past weekend, I think you deserve to get the accolades that you are going to be getting, and you deserve them. And I know that this team is not very big on that and not too forward thinking, but there's good when looking down the schedule, and I'm not saying the team does this, but you certainly zero in on a big series in Nashville against South Carolina, down the road, that as well as they're playing. I mean, you see their South Carolina's 24-2. That's a pretty gaudy number. And then before that, you got to go to Columbia. But there's some, as you look down the road, there's Tennessee, Kentucky, Alabama, Florida, Arkansas, those teams. But I will say, if there was ever a year that when you look at the schedule at the beginning of the year and you said, the schedule's pretty works in Vanderbilt's favor, it would have been this year. And I think you and I talked about that. No LSU on the schedule this year, which they're always a tough foe. And then A&M could go either way. I know they're not on the schedule this year, but it's things are lining up well, and it's like one of those icebreakers in the Arctic that you see that cut the ice. Those ships that you see, they're not going too fast; they're just cutting through that ice, and that's the way I kind of sometimes envision teams that are playing this well. They're just like an icebreaker; they're cutting the ice slowly, methodical, carving people up, and that's what they're doing right now.
Yeah. It is amazing to look back and think they've got a plus 82 scoring margin over the last 8 games, and that includes the last 2 national champions. That's really right. Just hard to fathom, and I get that those teams have got some pitching issues, but here we are in an era of NIL where people, I think us included, were questioning, are they going to be able to sustain what we've become used to watching with them? And those were programs that were riding highs off winning national titles. I think it's easy to raise money for NIL or whatever at that point. And here we are in a turn that I don't think either of us would have expected a month ago.
Oh, yeah. And you look across the whole landscape of college baseball right now and where teams are in the rankings and what is our strength of schedule now? I didn't look at it recently. I think it's 18. I think it's going to, well, it is going to end up better than that because there's some pretty fierce RPI teams ahead. But like you go back and look, okay, the TCU game, they looked awful. TCU hasn't been quite as good, I think, as we expected, but I think that team's also been banged up.
Oklahoma State is probably in contention for a national seed. Got to win there. Texas looked awful when we saw Vanderbilt play Texas. I don't know if you know this. Texas just had a 15-game winning streak snapped. So that team has gotten it together. UCLA, I think, has fallen in the RPI. It was number one about a week ago, but they got a series sweep there. Again, winning 2 or 3 against the Big Ten. I don't know how much that helps, but it doesn't hurt. Loyola Marymount is 73 in the RPI. Series win there. Don't know how much it helps, but it doesn't hurt. And then sweeps of the Mississippi schools.
Well, the RPI is going to go down. I mean, the way Ole Miss and Mississippi State and Georgia is not going to help. So it's probably going to get worse before it gets better, don't you think?
Well, yes and no, but all the teams they've got coming up on the schedule. I mean, Kentucky's the number 1 RPI team in the country right now. South Carolina's 3, Arkansas's 4. All those teams are ahead on the schedule. Florida's 11. By the way, Texas is 14 in the RPI. So that's a win that's going to look really good at season's end. Oklahoma State's 25.
Yeah, UCLA is going to be a regional team. I mean, I was impressed with them. They're going to be a tough out. So that victory, those wins over them are going to come in handy at the end of the year.
They're going to have a top 10, and I'll bet you a top 5 strength of schedule by the time this is all over and done with.
No, I agree. But just who would have thought that Ole Miss would be having the troubles? And that just goes to show you get some injuries on the pitching staff, your top frontline guys, and we've seen it before and somewhat here at Vanderbilt. But you stay healthy. Staying healthy is paramount if you're going to be making a run. And Ole Miss's problem is the injuries. Mississippi State's is just the fact that the arms aren't there that they thought they were recruiting or they thought they were getting through the portal, and just not there. And this is such a pitching dominant league early on until the weather starts heating up. But that is it's just so strange to look at the standings and see those 2 teams at 0-6 at the bottom. That's just unfathomable. But that's the way it is in this league. And A&M being at 1-5 is surprising too. So for all, and the Georgia side, who's coming in this weekend, there was a lot of, and of course, a lot of these are in the can, Chris, these articles about teams, but I don't know if it was in D1 baseball or one of the sites was the surprise team of the year were the Georgia Bulldogs. Well, I mean, I think that probably was written maybe 2 weeks ago, and they're 1-5 and 15-9. I mean, granted, they played South Carolina. They've had some, but those sometimes you come out of the blocks too quick on these. Who's your team of the year? Or who's your surprise team of the year? And we'll certainly see how they are coming in this weekend.
Yeah, I thought that about Georgia too because that lineup is just so old, but the pitching has kind of fallen apart. But that's a team that's given Vanderbilt trouble. I remember sitting in the stands with you. I think this is when we couldn't get in the press box during COVID and watching a lot of that Georgia series.
Yeah.
And we watched Sam Leboki get hurt, and Georgia's hit the daylights out of the ball. Georgia's a pretty right-handed heavy team, which Vanderbilt's got 3 left-handed starters. So I don't think it's going to be a cakewalk this weekend.
No, and they scored 16 against Auburn on that Sunday to get their first win in the conference.
They scored 24.
Oh, they did? Okay, 16 run. It was a 16-run inning that they had. In the 8th. So anytime you can put up a number like that, and so that can somewhat carry over to the next weekend. So I don't think there's any way, and I think this coaching staff's got them grounded enough that they're going to cakewalk through anything, and that every weekend is going to be like it was in Starkville this past weekend. Because there's some teams that can get on a run, and we're in that third weekend where. If you are a 1-5 Georgia, and you're going to be the heat's on to give your best effort and to come in there and do anything you can to win ball games because you can't get too far down. You start thinking about 1-8, you start those type of situations, or you run into some issues down the road that it's going to be very tough to crawl back into the conference lead or as far as getting into the tournament when you start out with those numbers.
One concern I do have for them, and I think Devin Futrell is better than 90-something% of the number 3 starters in the country, probably at least 95%. But he does have a fly ball tilt. And if you haven't noticed, fly balls have been leaving parks at a pretty rapid rate, and the weather is only getting warmer.
Yeah, the ball is traveling a lot. I mean, of course, our sample from last weekend, it looked like, everything was flying out of there. But even on both
Chip,
sides.
It's not baseball anymore. It's pinball.
Yeah, it's crazy. And Futrell, yeah, we're nitpicking here, but that's what we're here for. Of the 3 guys, if you look at the stat sheet, you've got, in order of ERA, it's Holton, Owen, Futrell in that order. Well, I mean, it's Friday, Saturday, Sunday starter, and which in a way you would think it should be. And you're nitpicking on Futrell is this, I mean, he doesn't have the pop on the fastball like Holton does, maybe a few miles an hour slower on that, and comparatively from what he did the first couple years, and I still think his changeup is his best pitch, and he throws it so well, and he can throw it any time that he wants to. But my goodness, he struck out 20, walked 9, 3.55 ERA, and he's got more wins than anybody on the staff. He's got 4. But if there is one thing that as these guys continue to get healthy, hopefully with Dukanich, and there's still going to be that sense of competition for that Sunday thing. I'm not saying that Futrell's in any danger of losing his spot on Sunday, but when you do have that heat of guys throwing well in midweek games, there's the chance that could be the possibility that someone slides in there and does it. I don't think it's anytime soon, and when things are going well, I don't think you do it. But there's enough of healthy arms back there, and when you look at some of the numbers innings-wise, I mean, you think that Schultz has only thrown 9 2/3 this year, and some of these guys who would normally get more innings. So there are going to be some opportunities for some guys. And to reiterate my point, though, when you're beating people's brains in about 20-plus runs, it's hard to get those guys action. So it's a double-edged sword.
Well, they got some pretty good action for some, I'm not going to say bottom end of the staff arms yesterday because it's Patrick Riley and Grayson Carter, but I think you had to be encouraged about the way those guys threw on Tuesday against Lipscomb.
Yeah, a lot of strike throwing. I saw some velocity out of those guys that was impressive. It was the first time that I'd really taken a good hard look at Grayson Carter and analyzed it. But he threw 76 pitches, 5 innings, and gave up 2 hits in those 5 innings and 1 earned run. But I was impressed with him. He's got a live arm, Chris. Cunningham threw the 1 inning, and that was, of course, by design. I think they wanted to get him back out there, but I thought he had his stuff was good. Even just in his 14 pitches that he threw, I was impressed. So Cunningham, Carter, Ginther, Riley, with Riley just getting some work in, was good to see. It's been a while since he's been out there, but those 4 guys, they gave up 3 hits amongst them, and I was really impressed with. Not a lot of walks. Carter's the only guy who walked people. He had 2 walks, but the other 3 guys didn't walk anybody. A total of 8 strikeouts and 2 walks for those 4 guys. And I was impressed. I would think, Grayson Carter, we've talked about him. He was a guy that really stood out to me, and I think they wanted to see more out of him. I think that was on purpose, and it was he's got some pretty electric stuff. Big, long motion, live arm, ball explodes out of his hand, some good movement, and good repertoire pitches, good curveball, changeup was working well. He threw it in some tight spots, so I was impressed with him.
Chip, I've talked about the plus 82 run margin over the 8-game winning streak, and of course they're not going to keep that up. But I do wonder how much of what they've done offensively they can sustain, because it looks like it's a pretty good hitting lineup to me. This season of the Vandy Sports Podcast has been made possible by my friend Dr. Jody Jones, DDS. When it comes to general or cosmetic dentistry services, Jody is the best in Nashville. Just check out his client list. It testifies to that. He sees movie stars, music stars, athletes, coaches, you name it. Jody is the dentist of choice for stars in Nashville, but he sees regular folks like you and I as well. What people love about Jody's office is the ambiance. It's relaxing, it's friendly. Someone described it to me as a tooth spa. Whether your needs are general or cosmetic, go see Jody today. Call him 615-270-2322. See him at 55 Music Square East, not far from downtown or the Vanderbilt campus. Jody is a former Vanderbilt football player and a huge Commodore booster, so go and talk Vandy sports with him while you're there. Go see Jody Jones today. Thank him for his support of this podcast, because without it, this season would not be possible.
Yeah, and it's contagious. It's simply contagious when that happens, and you do that, and the margin and everybody's confidence is up. But if I'm a betting person, and I would think that they would be able to roll in this weekend and not sweep, or sweeping is such, as Tim Corbin has said, is such a foreign thing to even think about. But I think if they continue to just be businesslike in their approach and not try to change too much, I do like the order of the lineup. I like the order of it. I like the positions on the infield where they have guys now. I like the little bit of older guys and with Shrek in the lineup, and the experience, and then the youth and that they have sprinkled in as well. I like the way Bradfield's been playing as of late. He tends to be as good as his first at bat. I've talked to that with a lot of people, and of course, a lot of people are like that. But if he gets on, if he draws a walk, if he gets a stolen base, I'm just talking about his defensively. I don't think there's anything to talk about other than just being stellar. And it was mentioned last night in the TV broadcast. There's been very few outfielders like that kid roaming the outfield at the Hawk. But offensively, if he gets on a roll and gets some confidence early, and it just goes to show you what was he batting a few weeks ago, talking about Enrique Bradfield.
I think he was under 200, wasn't he?
Yeah. And so he's got that, and it's tough when you get in a hole like that. He's at 275, but I would love to see what he's hitting over the last, six games or seven since the Ole Miss series, and it's been a market improvement.
Chip, it's not even April yet. This feels like, and I don't know that we would have expected it coming in, but it feels like this might be one of their better defensive teams.
Yeah, and you've exactly 16 errors and fielding 981. And you've got, at the beginning of the season, Davis Diaz took some lumps. He's got 5 errors, but that's kind of calmed down, Chris. A lot of those, if I had the stats in front of me, I would bet of those 5 errors, I would say 4 of them came in the first, 4 or 5 games. He had a rough first weekend. And, but yeah, they definitely are rolling double plays. As we talked about, they've turned 24 on the season, which the opposition's only turned 7, but that leads the Southeastern Conference, and they certainly have a rhythm. They can get the ball in key situations. They feed off each other, and just a really good, solid defensive team. You got Bradfield out there anchoring center field, and you got Vaston at short, who seems to have a lot of range and a very quick release. So agree with that. And they got to keep that up because of the pitching and the defense. If they can keep that together as well as they're hitting, it's going to be a hard team to beat right now, the way they're playing.
Here's another thing. You remember the way they started the season, the pitching didn't look so hot. They give up 11 the first game and a loss to TCU. They give up 9 and hang on for dear life against Oklahoma State. They have not allowed since that time. They gave up 7 to Austin Peay about this time a month ago. Gosh, that game has been a month now.
That's right.
And I think that's a high watermark for them. They allowed 7 to Mississippi State this weekend. So, yeah, where you were seeing pinball numbers across the country, they've not been giving them up.
Yeah, against Loyola, it was that 9 in the loss on the 12th, March 12th. But, yeah, it's just you're seeing a lot of inflated numbers, and sometimes you wonder, you and I have talked about this for years, and talked about whether it's the ball or the bats or, I think you would think that they've cracked down on the bat part, with just all the commotion that's happened. They're having to validate the bats before series and all that. It's gotten more scrutinized if it's being enforced, but you are seeing a lot of offensive numbers across the country. But yeah, ever since that Loyola game, they gave up 9 in the loss on March the 12th. It's just been one-sided. All these games have been completely one-sided. Mississippi State scores 7 on Sunday. 4 of those coming in 4 of the 7 coming late in the one inning. And so it's really difficult. It's really difficult in this league with the pitching prowess that's out there to score that many runs. And I think this is a tribute. I don't care who it is, if it's Mississippi State who's struggling or if it's Ole Miss who's struggling. You put those numbers on the board with some of the arms that I have that are still available in this league, and it's a task that is to be commended.
Chip, we hit a lot of ground today. Any parting thoughts on things we perhaps did not cover?
No, I just it's a fun time to be at the park. I encourage all the fans to come out this weekend. I know the weather could be iffy a little bit with could be some storms coming in, but this is a time when you as a fan base, these kids played in front of 8,000-9,000 people on the road, and I know it's a different dynamic on Friday night and Saturday in Starkville, and they come back and they need the support of their fan base because it is definitely baseball season's rolled in, and these kids are playing really well and deserve the support. So I hope the fans will come out to the Hawk this weekend, and I'm going to be traveling and unfortunately going to have to follow from the road. I'm at a soccer tournament in Cleveland, Ohio, a lovely place. It's supposed to snow, I think, but this team deserves their all the support and right now, and it's a fun team to watch and offensively and a lot of energy and we'll just see how they continue to roll it. I know Georgia's going to be hungry, though. They got some talent, as you mentioned, an old team. It's interesting. They got a kid on their team, the first baseman. His name, I think it's Cody. Oh, he's a big kid.
You've got a freshman who was one of the best hitters in the conference, yeah.
That's right. But they've got a kid that I followed when I was working for ESPN, doing some work on the Little League World Series several years ago, and he was 12, and he was like a man-child back then, and he's now their first baseman, and he's not doing too well, but he was one of those kids that you see when you watch the World Series that you're like, check this kid's birth certificate, and I think it's Webster or Wagster, but he's on this team. But Georgia does can generally play Vanderbilt pretty tough, and they are a team that's going to be desperate to not slide back any further. So excited to see how this team continues to prove, and man, what a difference a month makes, right? I mean, from where after this, and so hopefully we'll just keep it going and have some good stuff to talk about next week.
Chip, the weather is warming up. School will be out here in a month and a half, and I guess more like 2 months. But anyway, people will be looking to buy and sell homes, and I hear you know a little bit about that.
Yeah, talk about that just briefly, Chris. We are definitely in the spring market here in Nashville. It kind of opens up in late February and early March, but slightly still leaning towards a seller's market, although if you look at almost a barometer, that it's kind of leaned a little bit more trending towards more buyer opportunities, but still trending towards the seller's market. Inventory is pretty low. And when those factors are still in place, you need to definitely have representation on your side if you're buying or selling a home to get the maximum value out of your house and cash out, whether if you're selling your home and buying in another area of Nashville, or you're moving out of town and going to another city. Or you're on the buy side and you're just new to Nashville and you're desperate to find a place, whether it's a home or condominium. We've got the representation here in our offices. We got 2, one in Brentwood and one in Green Hills, over 180 agents, and we rely on promoting our company as full-time agents, people who do this for a living and not fly-by-night, and selling 1 or 2 homes a year. And we were just recognized, Chris, our firm, to toot our horn a little bit. For the 5th or 6th year in a row, we have the highest average sale price of any firm in Nashville area. We're not the biggest, but we tend to have those houses in the upper category, but that doesn't mean we can sell a $300,000-$400,000 condo or an upper level house. So we've got the experience in definitely in our 180 agents that we have at Fridrich and Clark. So check us out on the web at frederickandclark.com, or you can call me personally. I've talked to several listeners of this podcast, and I'm very appreciative of people have reached out, and we've helped them with their real estate needs. You can call me at 615-327-4800. You can look us up on the web again at frederickandclark.com, and we'd love to help you out for your real estate needs.
Chip, thanks for joining us. We'll catch you next week after Vanderbilt has played Georgia.
All right, Chris, take care. I hope you have a good weekend.
Thank you for listening to today's episode. We thank our presenting sponsor, Jody Jones DDS. We thank our other sponsors, Sutherland and Belk and MyPerfectFranchise.net. If you're interested in sponsoring this podcast, and that's how we make this work, please email me at chrisley70@gmail.com. We also ask that you subscribe to our website, vandysports.com. That is $99 a year. You get things there that you don't get here. And of course, please rate, review, and subscribe where you see our podcast. That helps us get noticed. Be sure to follow us on Twitter at vandysports.com. Follow me at chrisley70. And finally, subscribe to our Vandy Sports YouTube channel as well. Thank you for listening to the Vandy Sports Podcast, which is part of the 440 Network. I'm your host, Chris Lee. We'll catch you with another episode coming very soon.